the thing I most admire about you and why you're here, one of the reasons is you're very tranquil and you're always very present. And I don't know why. Why do you think that is? Is it because you've been following like religion and the church, or is it because of meditation, or is it something else?
Probably a bit of just a mixture of things, really. But a big part of it is probably because of what I believe and my spiritual sort of side of life, which encompasses pretty much everything that I do. At least I would hope so.
Were you always on a path like that, or did that happen? Like, was there a time in your life when that developed, or was it since you were a kid? Like, were your family all very religious and?
Yeah, no, it hasn't always been like that. So I'm 29 now. Became a Christian around about 18, 19, so it's been 10 years. So yeah, what you've gotten to know is basically the latter or the most recent stage of my life. But before, no, I was just I was raised in Africa, born and bred. Moved here when I was 13, and yeah, I was. You grew up in a country where, especially sub-Saharan Africa, where the belief in God is just a given. It's normal. There's no other option. And I never really explored that side of life until I came here, and I started to think, oh, okay, so do I have to believe in God? Is this a thing?
Right. So it wasn't even a question.
Yeah, no.
Until you came here.
Yeah, it wasn't even a question.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is it something that everyone does in Africa? Believe in God?
For the majority, yeah, I believe so. Yeah. It's either Muslim or Christian, but yeah, or like sort of cultural based, historic, like ancestral worship, that sort of stuff is quite popular.
And
so
do you think that benefits the way of life out there compared to here?
I don't know. It depends what what counts as benefits.
Because you look at our society now as very individualist, and we don't have a kind of big community like that. I mean, my granddad had a live-in nurse in his house for like 3 years before he died, and she was from Africa, and she told us about where she used to live and how they have this great community. They all just eat meals together. Everything is everyone's. They kind of communally raise their children, and there's something really romantic about that. And I think there's something that we've lost in our modern Western individualist society that isn't out there, and I think maybe we'd benefit from having a little bit of that here. Do you think?
Absolutely.
It seems like most people are atheists in Britain.
I think it would maybe be a majority. I don't know any statistics or anything.
I reckon it's got to be a majority.
Yeah. I think on the majority side of things, most people don't believe in God, or they're sort of in between. But yeah, I think most people identify as having no belief.
So in what way are you spiritual?
In what way? So I've gotten to know the Protestant kind of side of Christianity. So there are Christians who say, they say they're Christians, but they're Mormon, or they're in the Mormon religion, or they are Jehovah's Witnesses, which is something I wouldn't identify with. So it's it's interesting in the sense that it's so varied, but in one sense we're all labeled as Christians. But it really depends what you mean by Christian. Yeah, so I'm more Protestant, so that means we're cut off from the Roman Catholic Church, as far as I understand, which has been a predominant religion in this country. Or and then there's like a little separate thing, which is the Church of England, which kind of identifies with Roman Catholic Church, but doesn't. So it's like separate, but the way they do things is very similar to the Roman Catholic Church. Whereas in Europe in general, and I think Latin America and other countries, Catholicism is still very much a big thing.
That's the biggest church in the world, isn't it, Catholic?
I would think so.
I have a question. So you come to this country at 13, and you realise that people question whether God exists, whether they believe in things, and then you say that you properly started devoting yourself to Christianity at 18, 19. What took you from realising that people are questioning it yourself to you having that firm belief at 18, 19? Was there a moment, or was it kind of a shift in your perspective on things? I just want to know about that. What was that kind of turning point?
Because I would have thought 18 is quite a...
18's that time where you kind of reject everything that you've been told.
I wouldn't have thought
and
many people sort of have that change around that time.
Sure, yeah, no, I get that. It might seem, counter culture and whatnot. I came here at 13 and then went to high school, secondary school. I didn't really have much of an influence until maybe 15. I think that's when that started, because I moved to a different school, got to know this guy, and it's basically been through this one person who is currently my best friend. and he used to, he was born in a religious family. His parents are from, like a religious sort of background. They are leaders in the church, and so he's very much grown up in that. And then he basically said, hey, you want to come along to these meetings that I go to? And he always talked about it as though it's the best thing in the world. You got to experience it. And over time, I just went to the meetings, and I didn't like it at first. I was like, you guys are crazy. Like, I don't feel like I have any part in this. But for some reason, I kept coming back because it was so weird and so strange. But something about it called me back. And then by the time I got to 18, I was going pretty much every meeting. And I was like, I think I might as well become one. And that was it.
That strong sense of community then you must have found there.
Yeah, again, strong sense of community within the church it's stronger than, even I would argue, than family, because you get to have so many different kinds of people you would never interact with in your life, right? Different personalities, different people from all over the world, but this one thing unites people, that is just this person that we believe in, and we believe in the same principles, and we just get together and we do the same thing in the same sort of spirit, quote unquote. It's actually absolutely amazing. I can't really explain it.
People say they find God, but from people I know who were introduced to it by their families, they were sort of forced into it, and because they're young they don't have an interest, and I think that they don't get the benefits from it, so they're not interested. However, it might be a better way to start the journey when you're already established yourself.
I think if you're forced into something as a child, then you have that rebelliousness where you just want to kind of move away from anything your parents think, when you get to a certain age. And I think, it's definitely better to find it when you're an adult and you have your own kind of ways of critical thinking, and that you can make your own decisions. I think that happens a lot when people grow up in families where their kind of religion is crammed down their throat, that then they develop these biases when they grow older, and they associate it with negative stuff because of what they've been through as a child, and then they just can't really think about it too deeply,
So with how many years you've been going to church, like plus 10 or whatever, do you think you've had like a massive increase in your connection with God, and what does that feel like to you?
So it's a bit of both. So I feel like I have grown in knowing God, and but also just stagnated at some point. So at the very beginning, I was so immersed in the world of like the beginning, creation, and the history of human civilization, and how we came about, and what we believe, and how structure and society works. And I was just so engrossed. I just thought it was the most beautiful thing. And I wondered why I was never taught such things, because we all have these questions as to, why do we exist? What is the purpose of, our lives? Why do we do or behave the ways that we do? And for me, what I was learning at church made everything click and make sense. So, it's just, I felt like I've grown in that knowledge of what my purpose is in life, and what I believe us human beings are responsible of doing, and at the same time I've come to a place where haven't done the things I used to do in the beginning, where I would read the Bible all the time. I would pray in a different kind of spirit. I'd be excited to see what God can do, because we believe that God can do things that we can't. So at the beginning, I was ridiculous prayers. Really, I was like, oh, can you give me superpowers, or can you things like that. Yeah. Because you're just so excited about this new thing that is God. Because when you understand what a supernatural, timeless being is, you think, whoa, I can do anything now. I can ask, and I can become the person that I think I should be, sort of thing. So yeah, I've grown, but I've matured as well, in the sense that I'm no longer praying for superpowers, but I'm praying for things I think that are much more beneficial and good.
And I think human beings, we fundamentally need answers to those kind of questions, like why are we here, how did we get here, and what are we supposed to do here? And I think people, whether they realise it or not, they find an answer to that. So for some people it's religion, but for some people it's addiction to to some kind of substance or some kind of way of life.
Yeah.
We need something to hold on to, something to let us know that this is what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And I think religion is one of the best ways people can find those answers.
So religion can be therapeutic.
Yeah. No, I'm quite. It's nice to hear an open sort of opinion about religion, because it's one of those things that's divisive, and some people will, just won't listen.
I think the religious experience is fundamental to the human condition. I think people that will disregard all of it, I think their God is something else. Their God might be a drug, their God might be a way of life, their God might be sex, their God might be money, their God might be status, right? But we all worship something.
Absolutely, I agree.
I see that everywhere, and that was something that clicked in my head recently. It's like, wow, if you don't find connection through the divine, you'll try and find it through something here, but it'd probably be worse for you. It'd probably be some kind of instant gratification that makes your life worse.
Yeah.
In particular, like praying. Muslims, they pray like 5 times a day. From an ignorant point of view, like, what are you praying about if you're doing it every day 5 times a day? Do you not run out of stuff to pray about?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's a good question, actually. I don't know what Muslims would be praying for. I would think it may be similar to Catholicism, where prayers are very much set, or you have like things you're supposed to like go in order with, like, I don't know, like the rosary or stuff like that. And
wait, what's the rosary?
It's like, that bead sort of necklace, I believe, that Catholics wear, and it's got a cross on it, and like that apparently helps them to, they pray for a particular thing, and I don't really know how it works. I'm very sort of unwise and ignorant with that subject area, but I would imagine it's like set prayers, like that you would read out or you memorize, and then so when it comes to time to pray, you just kind of reel it off, rather than have to think about original prayers that you're praying about. The
way I think about it is the prayer is like the routine of that kind of worship. When you worship something, you have to have a routine of behaviours that shows commitment to that thing. So that's what prayer is. It's not necessarily asking for things that you want in your life. It's showing up and showing that force that you worship that you are committed to it.
Yeah.
From my perspective, that's how I see it anyway.
Philip, do you drink alcohol?
I do now. I didn't used to.
Why is alcohol in the Bible and like such a harmful drug in this beautiful and timeless book?
I think it's because we are taught in the Bible that we are supposed to be sober-minded in the way that we behave and think, and certain things do not assist in being sober-minded, because you lose control of yourself if you're not careful. So some Christians are on the side that I will never touch alcohol because it will lead me or open the door for unhelpful things. Not that by itself is bad. But some people are, I see that alcohol can lead to problems. However, I can allow myself a glass of wine. People fall on different, sides of the spectrum, and kind of have their own personal conviction within their kind of Christian growth and belief, and sit on different scales. So Jesus, drank wine, and the disciples, and I think the argument is that back then, wine was more fruity rather than more like alcohol than it is now, but nevertheless, it was still wine, right? And he didn't regard it as a bad thing, but the Bible does teach that we are supposed to be in control of ourselves and sober-minded.
And I guess it's everything in balance, really, because if you think about it, let's say you abstain from alcohol, then you made a statement that you do that for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
One could argue that substance still controls you, because it's controlling your behaviour. Whereas if you can approach it from time to time, but keep it in a controlled manner, that shows that you actually have power over that thing.
That's it. Yeah. There's that aspect of some things I will not touch, but I can't force that on you, because you're a different person, you're a different conviction. But also some things that are that are hard, kind of known facts that we are supposed to walk this way, and it's like a balance of those two acts as we kind of follow God in Christianity.
society has morals, but you should find your own morals.
Yeah, within what God says as a Christian, right? Because I don't know what your beliefs are. I mean, what spiritual would be your category where you belong with yourself.
I believe in God more than anything else, but I don't follow any traditional religion.
Okay, all right. So yours is like kind of loose or open, or open-minded, and you're willing to explore different areas of God and spirituality,
100%.
right? Whereas me, I would also define myself as spiritual, but I belong to this sort of group that I identify with and that I've grown up in the church, you know. So it all ties in together, and it's up to people to figure that out. And I believe it's one of our jobs as people who believe in Christ or God is to spread a particular message, and for people to take that and either decide to believe or not to believe.
And that's such a balanced way to do things, because trying to be dogmatic and force people to believe a certain thing, it just doesn't work. If anything, they want to think the opposite thing. So I think that's 100% the way to view it.
So how long did you teach in Spain for?
About 3.5 years.
And you taught kids English, right?
Yeah, so I was a teacher of English as a foreign language. Most people refer to that as TEFL, getting a TEFL qualification and all that, and you get to travel around the world and teach in different countries that allow you to, teach English in some capacity.
And when you're teaching children, I think you have a massive responsibility on yourself, because you're impacting the trajectory of their life. What did you find were the best ways that people would learn?
It's about, I think, when I got the training, which it wasn't extensive, but they would give you resources, books and stuff like that. You're supposed to kind of adhere to a curriculum, and a big part of the training was identifying that people are different and they have different modes and ways of learning. So you teaching particular grammatical concept just by repetition or writing on a piece of paper is not going to work for other students who are maybe more sort of energetic and require more sort of actions and things like that, or pictures, or are very visual. But I think today in modern society we acknowledge that there are different types of learning, and individuals have either, ways that they picture information or understand information, and it's about tailoring your lessons to kind of accommodate almost a little bit of everything, so that your students all, ideally would take in the information and be able to learn. So I think that was probably the biggest thing I learned, is to just don't approach it in one way and expect your class and, to understand everything and get angry at Timmy because he doesn't understand it, whilst others, are getting it.
So can you speak Spanish as well?
I think I can get by.
Was that something that you learnt out there? Was that something you learnt before, or...?
It was something I learned when I was out there.
So you kind of just threw yourself into it then, in a way.
I did, but that's part of the excitement and just privilege of being young and being able to kind of do whatever you want to do.
Yeah. So how did that decision come about? So what age did you go out there?
So I went out there around about 23, I think.
So that was after your degree, I imagine, and you wanted to go and have some experiences. I mean, what came along? When did you see that opportunity, or how did you make that decision?
It came about. I went to Cambridge on this university program, Christian affiliated thing that I went to, and it was about meeting international students and basically befriending them and helping them to have a good time in England, because unfortunately English people or culture can be closed, and people are wonderful and they're nice, but international students can struggle to kind of make an English friend or even be in an English home and that sort of stuff. So part of this, it's an actual charity. I think it's Friends International is what they're called. So I ended up going there, and then I met one of my colleagues there. It was over the summer, and we were seated at a cafe, and these Chinese people came by and started speaking Cantonese or whatever other language they were speaking, and she responded back, and she's normal Caucasian British girl, and I was like, how do you know Cantonese or Mandarin? And she's like, oh yeah, I went on this program, British Council, studied there, and they sent me out, and I learned Chinese that way. So I was like, oh, I want to get involved with this. So I looked it up, and one of the countries I could go to with minimal or little experience was Spain, and I had a phone interview. I literally just memorized like a few lines from something, and they're like, okay, you're ready, let's go. And I ended up going to Spain.
Wow.
But I would have thought, like, with all the countries in the world, wouldn't it be easier if we just all spoke the same language?
Wouldn't it be easier? Yes, I agree. You would.
Why can't we just agree? Why can't we get a country?
Yeah.
Say, I don't know, English is the most popular language, right?
Yeah.
All the countries can have something else in return, but you've got to speak English. And everyone will be fine with that, I reckon.
Well, so Jacob, if someone comes in and says you have to learn Spanish now, and when you're not allowed to speak English, how would you feel about that?
I prefer Spanish to English.
Right.
It sounds nicer, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So I'd be like, okay. Well, you know what would be a better idea is start teaching the kids at school. So the kids that are just going to reception now, the teachers speak Spanish to them, and then they grow up to speak Spanish.
Yeah, I mean, it does annoy me like that in our education system. Like we aren't taught, say, Spanish or another language that popular, like as strong as other countries are taught English. Like I went to Bulgaria recently, and every local could speak English.
Right.
And you'd got if a Spanish person came to England, it'd be like 1% of people, maybe less than that could speak to them in their own language. It's like this ignorance of England is like, we have a popular language, we don't care about yours.
It's a bit embarrassing. Yeah, it is. It really is. And it took me going outside of this country to realize that, like yourself. And yeah, it's just weird why we don't do that. But it also makes sense because the rest of the world seems to speak English. So, like, why should we bother, sort of thing?
How long did it take from kind of when you arrived, and I'm assuming you had a bit of Spanish just to get by then, to the point where you felt, okay, I'm competent enough to get through with this now? Was it like a year? Was it like 6 months of being in that environment? How long does it take for a language? Because I've got a friend who's moving out to Spain actually to play basketball professionally. Okay. I want to get an idea of how quick it's going to be until he's bilingual.
Oh man, that's also very dependent on his experience and his abilities, his background, his history. Has he learned a language before? Can he speak other languages besides English? That helps a lot. And because by the time I learned English, I had kind of acquired 2 languages from Zimbabwe. One of them's gone now, unfortunately, but I still speak the other one. So I think without knowing at the time, that helped me assimilate Spanish.
Yeah, because you developed the skill of being able to learn a language.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So about how long did it take you then from arriving in Spain to feeling competent enough to not be scared to talk to someone?
Man, I can't remember, but I think it was about the first year mark that I had my first Spanish dream. And they say, apparently, when you have like a dream in the foreign language...
you dreamt in another languge?
Yeah. It's very cool. Yeah.
I didn't even know that happened.
Yeah, it's amazing. Absolutely
So do you
amazing.
start talking to yourself in Spanish then?
Yeah.
In your head?
Like, if you're around it all the time...
Yeah. And I think that's when you start to actually get to grips with, I'm actually understanding now. I'm actually able to think in this foreign language. And when you're able to think, then you really understand, the roots of the language.
Joel, learning another language is said to have a lot of benefits, but one of them is that I saw somewhere reduces the likelihood of getting memory problems and like Alzheimer's and stuff.
I mean, language is one of the most complex things the brain does. We still don't really understand it.
But why would learning another language reduce the likelihood of getting a memory disorder?
Well, I don't really know the full science behind it, but from just like intuition, it's like if you're using lots of your brain, which you have to do when you learn another language, then if you use something, you don't lose it. Do you know what I mean? You're maintaining that ability, that cognitive function, and then that may extrapolate into your memory kind of thing. But yeah, because it's mental. I mean, look at the size of our brain compared to the brain of a dog. The difference, that's why we have complex language and they don't. It's because we have that massive cortex that can just regulate everything we need for a language, because it's just unbelievable. It blows my brain that I can make a noise at you, and then your brain understands that noise, okay, and then you make a noise back to me, and I understand the noise, right? But that happens in split seconds.
It's brilliant.
We don't have to think about it. And now you're making noises in different languages, and now you're having dreams where these noises are coming up in these dreams. It's unbelievable. So I can see why. If you learn a language, your brain is going to be are used all the time in those areas where they may not have been used before. So yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's basically like that, whereby it's also the same principle for exercise. So if you exercise and you build muscle, for example, you are a far better chance of leading a healthier life because you're preventing diseases and all that sort of stuff.
The best thing you can do to maintain your brain health is actually move your body. That is the best thing to maintain cognitive function. It's not any of these like brain training games or these IQ games that they try and advertise to you as being good. The best thing you can do is exercise, because it maintains like the tiny little blood vessels in the brain, giving all the neurons oxygen and things, and then that means they can maintain their function throughout your life, which is weird, because you'd think you need to think to keep your brain active, but really it's moving.
Yeah, that's what people usually recommend is, brain exercises, play chess, do something that,
works out your brain.
Yeah, works out your brain in a way. But it's
not actually a muscle, it's made of fat.
But are the brain and the body connected?
Yeah, they're basically the same thing. Anyone who thinks they're two separate things is just like, no, there's no way. Because everything comes from the brain to the body, and from the body to the brain, everything. It's all one thing. Yes, it's the brain. I think that comes from the fact that you feel like you are your brain, but you don't feel like you're your body.
Don't you just say your body's your meat vehicle?
Your brain's part of your meat vehicle, yeah. Because there's a part of us that isn't body or brain, but that's getting into a whole new can of worms.
That isn't body and brain?
I think most Christians would agree, yes.
Really?
Yes. And they would
Spirit,
say...
isn't it?
Wait,
yeah.
So me and Joel think there's a part of us that's God. Do you agree?
Well, there's a part of us that's the divine. It's not God.
Yeah.
It's the single entity within you. It's that we all have a little fragment of the divine, and that's why that's what we are fundamentally. I think, really.
Absolutely. I would agree that there's part of us that's divine, because we all, no matter where we're from, as far as I understand and kind of like learned about the world, we all ask almost the same questions about life and about the world. Why is it that, people from halfway around the world, but we live in very different societies, and it's not all kind of made in the same way or structured in the same way, but we all seem to have or want or desire the same experience, whether that's... But again, that's arguable. But anyway, I believe that we do have some part that's divine, because we really do seem to ask the same questions about who we are as people, the divine, things that are outside of ourselves. Why do we all have that question?
And that's why I say the religious experience is fundamentals of the human condition. It just is. I'm reading a book at the moment. It's called The Denial of Death, by this guy called Ernest Becker, and he claims that humans have the experience they do because we are half animal, so we are half deeply limited by our biology. We shit, we have to eat, we have to sleep, we have sexual desire, we have all of these things that all the animals have, right? But we also have the capacity for abstract thought, and for compassion, and for love, and for honesty, and for the belief in the divine. And the reason that we look for things like a God and religion, and we need something higher than ourselves, as you said, is to justify this part of ourselves. So we don't feel like we are just this. We don't feel like we are just this animal destined to die. And I think that's why it happens. And that's why you don't see dogs or cats having existential dilemmas. Only human beings, because they don't have this. They just have this fundamental animal limitation, gonna die, just a process of evolution. And that's why as a human, I can't see myself as just being a tiny component in the evolutionary cycle. Maybe I am, right? But I prefer to live without that, because otherwise that can make life just seem meaningless. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. I couldn't have put it in better words.
You don't know that a dog's not believing in God.
They're not, brother.
It could be.
No,
why not?
How many dogs have you seen having a meeting about what it means to be a dog?
You know when you see a lady on a walk, on going on a walk, and then he's holding 4 leads of dogs. They're all there looking at each other.
Yeah, but they're not thinking, mate, what's going on? Why am I here? Am I just here to suffer? Mm-hmm. They're not thinking those things, man. They can't, because they're just animals.
Yeah.
What if humans didn't own animals? Would that be better if dogs were all sort of free?
And then they could have intellectual philosophical
Do you reckon liberals would
conversations.
say that?
No. That's why I don't know the answer. Yes, we have bigger brains, but there must be why the closest thing to us is a chimpanzee. So why are they not having philosophical
they've
thoughts?
Probably got a big brain as well.
Yeah, not as big as ours though.
But what about a gorilla?
Yeah, well, chimp's got a closer brain to ours than a gorilla, say. But yeah, it's just there's something about human beings that's a bit fishy, and I'm like, We can't just be animals, man.
No.
I don't see how where does consciousness come from?
And, absolutely.
They can't explain it.
Yeah, no. It's an excellent question.
And that's why I want someone to sit me down and say, Joel, this is where consciousness came from, and this is why we're here, but we can't.
If you knew all the answers, then there'd be no curiosity, and then therefore, what's the point?
Yeah. No, I mean, the best questions are simple, but they don't have simple answers. Like, why am I here? Why am I here and who I am? You can think about that for years.
We could spend the rest of our lives at this table talking.
Yeah.
And we just can't.
So who are you?
Oof. Oh man, who am I?
Are you your personality, or are you your past?
I am a living being that has been made in the image of God, a man, and I have the purpose of living and living in accordance to the purposes that my Creator has made me to.
But when you say you're made in the image of God, what image? Like the human image?
So like when God created, I mean, you can tell me if I'm wrong because it's just from my estimation, but when God created the world and created Adam and Eve, he created all human beings in the image of God. I think what that means to me is that image of God, that's the piece of divine within all of us. God didn't create all the animals within the image of God, he created the humans. And that's why we have a responsibility to serve God, because we have a bit of him inside of us. Is that kind of along the right lines?
Yeah, absolutely.
What does serving God look like? Is it just like being nice and
following God's word,
worship,
spreading the word in the world to do good? I mean, that's what God did when he created the universe, right?
But then you see, like, you go out on Exeter and you see these people hand out leaflets. Join God. Join
well, that's because human beings, we have a tribal instinct, right? And we want to create an us versus them mentality. And that's where religion can be twisted. And I think that's where a lot of the negative perceptions of religion come from, is that people, and it's also publicised so much by the media, because if people are just being religious and being nice and following the word of God, then the news aren't going to report on that because it's boring. But they're going to report on it when people do bad things, thinking that they're doing God's work, when really they're not. They've just been hijacked by their primal instincts for tribalism. So that's why, when you see people trying to convert people and being aggressive, well, they're not following God anymore. Because they're trying to own the other person, and really they're not loving them as their neighbour. They're just trying to force them, and they're trying to make them part of their own ideological beliefs. Where really the best perspective is to just lead by example, spread the word.
The next time you see someone trying to flaunt you a leaflet, you can't do it. It's not good, because it's all what we were talking about earlier. Is you've got to find it for yourself. You can't have someone force you into it.
No, yeah, that's it. You got to find it for yourself. But it doesn't mean we don't need guidance or help. I think people are more open to things, especially spiritual things, when they're given the opportunity to explore the questions that they have. One of the reasons, or one of the ways we get it wrong as, Christians or spiritual people, is when we shut people down because they have a question about God. Like, for example, I don't know, why did God kill all those people in the Old Testament, Yeah.
The Old Testament's brutal, mate.
It's a dark side of religion.
Yeah.
Wait, tell me that story. I don't know.
Well, there are multiple occasions whereby God leads his people Israel in through nations, and they basically annihilate like whole people groups because God has told them annihilate them. It's a fair question to ask and say, hey, I've heard or I've read in the Bible that God allows people to be killed in this way. If God is good, why is it that this occurs? I think we are supposed to be allowed to explore such questions instead of like shut people down, because some people are a bit like they get it wrong. They end up saying, oh, you're not allowed to question God. How dare you? Da 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 da. You will never. This is wrong, kind of thinking. But it's good to explore and ask questions and make up our own minds and hear the evidence that's before us. That's another thing. People believe that I'm just uneducated whatever, and I've just accepted that God exists and I live my life blindly. But it's been a series of incidents and events over my life whereby God has revealed himself to me and proven himself to be God through people, through my life, through events, through things, many, many things. So I'm not just laying my life because I'm like, oh, yeah, this is a nice thing to do. But it's because of evidence. It's because of real things that have happened in the past. Because it's nonsensical to believe any of this stuff if it wasn't enveloped by real history. And it is, you can go to museums, you can go to places, you can look up these things factually and scientifically and find evidence that these places and these names that we read about in the Bible are actual things that have existed. So why, how is that evidence for or against?
But then that evidence, it can't be 100% true because one, we weren't there, but also it's very many years ago, and it's like, what, 10 AD? Something like that.
Sure.
10 BC, sorry.
But I think the way you have to think about it, and this is the way I interpret all the Bible stories, is that they're symbolic in a way, I mean, when God's punishing the Israelites, right, whether that happened or not, whether there was swarms of locusts or whatever, isn't really important. I think what's important is thinking, if you don't follow God's word, bad things happen. And that's the underlying message.
So that story there could show karma to the
in some way, yeah. I mean, it's the same thing with Jesus. There was a guy called Jesus. He existed, right? But I'm not really interested in what he did. I'm interested in the symbol of his story, right? Because the symbol of his story is to be the ultimate individual in the world. You have to sacrifice yourself for the greater good, and that's what that story's about. And Christ is just the symbol of the best human you could possibly be. And as soon as I realised that, it's like, no, it's not actually about the story. It's about what it represents, and it's actually about how you apply it to your life. Yeah. Like, if you think about it, the question, do you believe in God, is not as important as the question of, do you live like God exists? That people think that do you believe in God is the same as do you act as if God exists, but it's not. That's the more important question, I think. Do you live as if you were like Christ? Do you try and be like Christ rather than do you believe he existed and that he walked across water? All that stuff, is that stuff that you can't prove that distracts people from what really matters inside of these stories.
Why did he walk across water?
I don't know, but that's the whole thing, isn't it? That Jesus could walk across water and turn water into wine and all that stuff that's unscientific. That's what puts people off when they look at it and be like, "That's the ultimate role model." That's what Jesus is. He's the ultimate role model.
I think like stuff like that, stories like that. The amount of stories that go on of like stuff that isn't possible, that must mean that it is possible. Do you know what I mean?
But sure. If you think about it though, so we've got Harry Potter, right? Maybe Jesus was just a great guy, okay? But then someone liked him so much, and he was such a nice person. He did so much good in the world that they created fictional stories about him because they liked him so much, right? We have them in our culture. Fiction is part of our culture, right? Superheroes, that's our version now. Marvel and superheroes like that, Superman. That's our version of Christ in the modern day, and people don't see that. That's the same thing. You look at Superman, that's an ultimate role model. He saves people, he's athletic, he's good looking, right? That is what we've done. We've created another story along those similar lines, but they don't make the connection that they're the same thing.
There are so many things within our culture that we have modeled after biblical stories. Absolutely. Or biblical characters or Jesus himself. Whenever there's an atypical savior, a person who has been destined, almost like they're born, kind of like Harry Potter, where like they're born with like this symbol and, everything around their lives kind of woves together to be able to save the day or even the world. That's really a picture that's been built and told for thousands and thousands of
Harry
years.
Potter sacrifices himself to save other people. In the second book, he goes down into the depths to save Ginny Weasley from the basilisk, right? He's put his life on the line. He's basically fighting a massive snake. What was the snake in the Bible? Yeah. That was the devil, okay? Harry goes down into the depths of the school. He fights the devil and he saves Ginny Weasley. That's a biblical story. But just it's interpreted in one day. And people watch Harry Potter. If you explain the plot line of the second Harry Potter film to people, they'd be like, why would I want to see a kid go into a toilet and then down through the dungeon find a snake? Yeah. Where's this phoenix coming from? It's a stupid story. Yeah. But you watch it because there's something in you, it's unconscious, and you go, yeah, this is exactly like the religious experience. This is something I'm looking for. And that's why when people are like Potterheads, right, they've got their own religion, but it's just Harry Potter.
Seems like all these stories, like the great stories, have a lot of meaning in them. That's very valuable to people.
And that meaning...
It's also like The Lion King. Like,
exactly,
I watched the two Jordan Peterson explains The Lion King, and that was really good.
Yeah. The Lion King's the same thing. Simba is the divine individual, and Mufasa is like this godlike thing. Simba is like Christ, and he has to go and he has to take on evil. He takes on Scar. He takes back the kingdom, and he does the right thing. He's the good guy. And we see it everywhere, and that's why you can go and watch animated lions talking about things. Like, does no one ever just question that? No, they don't.
Of course.
Because it's symbolic. It's the same symbolic story.
Does Harry Potter have a cross on his head?
Scar. It's a lightning scar.
It's like a lightning bolt sort of look, yeah.
But, and he's marginalised by his community. They don't like him, just as Jesus wasn't liked by the Romans. There's so many parallels. It's unreal.
We've been telling the same stories, just rehashed.
Yeah. I mean, it's everywhere. St. George and the Dragon, The Lion King, it was all of it. It's there.
Yeah. And talking about culture, culture's the only argument against why we can't all speak the same language.
What? Because we're different
Because
cultures?
it's nice to have a bit of culture with language, isn't it?
Mm.
That's the only argument I can think of.
I wouldn't like if we had one language though. Because then it's just like
There's so many in the world, isn't there?
Too many.
Just cut down.
Yeah, no. It also seems to be a natural thing that we do. We can't help ourselves from creating our own subcultures and languages. Because even within English, like you get patois,
accents,
got slang.
and slang. Exactly, it
you
always
got all
happens
sorts,
because people like identify their group with a way of communicating.
Yeah.
I don't mind if we're creating slang, but get rid of some Latin.
All right, yeah, but Latin's so integral to everything, bro. Like loads of English words came from Latin words.
Yeah,
loads.
Yeah,
and
but it
loads.
also came from one individual, like Shakespeare, like 1.2 thousand.
Shakespeare's got some great phrases. Yeah, yeah.
It's influenced our language.
I think we should cut down
Nah, because then look, if you limit people's language, you limit their ability to think.
and free speech.
Yeah, you limit their ability to speak and think. You limit their freedom.
Do you reckon like individuals could make up a language
Yes.
and then that could
It's-
easily
it's-
spread?
It's done all the time with movies and within like series, books. People create like there are linguists who are able to create like Lord of the Rings. Like they have their own sort of like language within that world. It doesn't actually like exist.
And that sort of helps them connect and be a part of an exclusive group.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the community. Yeah.
Yeah, you can certainly create your own language. Because even I think there are studies whereby they leave just babies or kids alone for a while, and they develop like their own, and there's no sort of influence over them. They can develop their own sort of like language and ways of communicating. It seems to be kind of inborn, and we just do that naturally. So,
What do you think the English language is lacking?
ooh, oh man, there are sort of like certain things we can't describe. I know like when I learned Spanish, I discovered that they have more words for like tastes to describe taste and to describe certain things. So where English is limited in certain things, whereby our vocabulary doesn't. It's not so good at describing like things like taste and how something feels or whatever it is. Whereas other languages have like different words for an experience, and we lack that.
If you actually think about it, words are really not that great at explaining like experiences and feelings. Like the word love, it's just 4 letters, and it's a noise that I make to you, and you have some understanding of what that means, right? But you can't truly get across what I'm experiencing. So I think that's what language is, isn't it? We go out into the world, we have experiences, and we try and get that across to other people by making these noises, but you can't really do it. Like the feeling of awe, right? Those 3 letters, that one noise, awe, that describes so many things that you can't. That's why when you have the cliche phrase, I can't put it into words, but it's true, there are things you can't put into words.
No, yeah.
In Spanish, you've got, I think it's Spanish, you've got like masculine and feminine sort of ways of saying stuff.
Yeah.
That's a bit weird, isn't it?
It is weird, but it comes from the tradition of Latin and the languages that modern languages are modeled like after. So because of Latin and things like that, they subsequently developed their own language to have masculine and feminine. So do the French, so do Italians, so do many other languages and stuff.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. So because of that influence, they've adopted it and just kind of made it their own. We're the weird ones without actual like masculine and feminine.
But what do you do if there's like some transgender and you're speaking and you don't know which form to speak in?
I have
That's a big problem.
Yeah. I don't know what they're doing in Spain or other languages, to be honest with you, but they're working it out just like we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, in relationships,
Hmm.
often there's maybe one individual gets out of order, right, in the relationship. Is there evidence, like, why relationships fail with that one person being out of order? Is that because of something in their past, or a characteristic that they developed? So, for example, if there's like one controlling partner, you might have dealt with some like abusive cases or whatever in your job. If there's one domestically abusive partner and controlling, why are they that way?
Okay, multiple factors come into this. However, when answering the question of how do people kind of, end up having bad relationships and break up and stuff like that, what influences that? I think a big part of it in modern society is how we understand the concept of love itself. Because I think many of us believe that love is what you feel at the time. And it's about what I can get out of this connection with this other human being. And I think because of that definition, that shapes the rest of how we interact with our partners. So in the beginning, it's exciting, it's amazing, everything is new, you are exhilarated about knowing this new person. And then that actually naturally tends to fade over time, whereby you know them deeply and intimately as this friend or best friend, and you're not surprised that they do certain things or they say certain things, and you're kind of like, oh, like that's when some people start describing as, oh, it's fizzling out or whatever it is, but because of your definition of what you think love is, oh, I'm no longer getting this thrill anymore, I'm no longer getting these wants that I used to get satisfied in the beginning with, and that must mean that we are over and we are have to see other people, sort of thing. I think personally that's shaped by what we believe love is, and that influences how we interact with people. As to how a person ends up being violent and all these things, it's the human condition. I believe that most people would agree that there's something about mankind that's broken. Something about mankind that just we have a proclivity to do bad even when we don't want to. And that's influenced by how we were raised, that's influenced by society, that's influenced by individual experiences. Even your brain, sometimes your brain is just kind of weird and it's wired differently, and it gives you a certain proclivity or dependency, or that's why some people have addictions, some people have different issues and stuff like that. There's something about mankind that's just broken, and that's influenced by various things.
And that's that animal limitation I was talking about earlier, that the human has that and it has the divine, and we have this kind of part of ourselves that we can't get rid of, the original sin as it was taught in Christianity, right? But I've got a bit of psychology that I can do to explain your like abusive partner, right? There's a guy called John Bowlby in the 1960s, and he was a massively influential in like the psychology around attachment, especially in infants, right? And he found that people's outcomes in relationships later in life were very largely dependent on their relationship with their primary caregivers as children. And he said there was a thing called the internal working model inside your own brain, right? So let's say you're a baby and you're 2 years old, okay, and your mother doesn't look after you the way she should. That can happen for various factors. Maybe she's got depression, maybe she has to work, maybe she's messed up herself, right? And maybe your father abuses her, or the other way around, or something along those lines. You witness that, okay? That parental relationship and the relationship you have to your primary caregiver, that creates your internal working model, which is like a template that you have to explore relationships the whole rest of your life and what you expect. So someone who is in maybe a violent or abusive relationship, whether they're the abuser or the victim, they have an internal working model that expects that. Because there's always the question of like, when people are in abusive relationships and other people on the outside can see it, it's like, why are you still there? Why do you still do this? Yeah. And it's because the people in there, well, that's what they expect. That's what something inside them thinks it needs to fulfill. That's what they think, like you're saying, that's what they think love is. That's what they think a relationship is. It all depends on how that's molded in you as a child. And I think that's really interesting as well.
So it's mostly to do with you as a child and your relationship to your parents.
Yeah, and specifically like your mother, your primary. That's what John Bowlby talks about, your monotropic attachment with one person. Yeah.
Oh, so how your relationship is with your mother is how you treat women.
In some way, yeah. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's a bit of, and then you can kind of link that to Freudian psychology of the association with the child and the mother and all the complex things that go on there. You know, it all, those first 5 years of life are so integral to everything else. If you don't socialise a child before the age of 3, apparently you can never socialise them ever again. Or it might be 4, but I know it's under 4.
Yeah. Those early years are apparently very, very crucial.
Because I've questioned before that, like when there's a mother who takes a whole year off to look after a child, I'm like, God, you'd get bored, wouldn't you? But it's actually quite important.
Incredibly important. And that's why, you know, we can go down some weird rabbit holes of like, is the fact that in most families both parents are working, is that a good thing? Or is it right to have, and I'm not saying the mum has to stay at home, dad can stay at home. But what I'm saying is, are we going to see a detriment down the line of kids having parents going back to work and them spending so much time at childminders and things? It's an interesting way of thinking about it.
I wonder what the lack of the father figure does.
Yeah, I mean,
loads of issues.
There's lots of research into it.
Linked with crime. If you study sociology, you'll find a significant link between the lack of fathers and criminal behavior and things like that. So
why do they do that?
Why do that?
Well, why does that mean the lack of the father means they're going to go and commit crime?
It's again comes down to things like attachment theory and things like that. I don't know what it is about fathers that kind of makes us go a bit nuts, to be honest with you.
Maybe it's like the father sometimes is like the one that disciplines and...
Sure.
So without that, then they've got no sort of boundaries.
Yeah. Boundaries and it can be an important thing.
Especially for like young boys and things, your father is your role model.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, then where do you look for role models? You know, a masculine... If you're a young boy and you don't have any good masculine role models, you're going to look to people who might be quite dangerous for you, and we're seeing that today in some degree. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's weird.
It's fascinating. Yeah.
There's a reason that you're supposed to have a father and a mother.
Yeah.
You know, we've been doing it for millions of years, right? You have a mother and father. They come together to create you. That didn't happen by accident.
Then what about the lesbian and gay couples?
Well,
yeah, that's another question. Yeah, very interesting. But I think, pardon my just lack of ignorance with this, because I don't really know a lot of gay couples. But I suspect that one of them takes a role that's very similar to either mother and the other a father.
Yeah.
They all have the kind of different. They both have different roles to play within that, because I think it's somewhat unnatural to have both of them be the father type or be the mother type. I think naturally there's some kind of gender, or
it's a dynamic in a relationship, and I think that's right. I think you don't necessarily have to be a man to be a masculine role model.
Yeah.
It's like, do you remember that thing that you showed me that was like where the superior man, where he argues that there's masculine and feminine energy?
Yeah, that's exactly it, and that's how I define it more easily. You meet some girls, some females, and they're incredibly masculine, but then you see some males and they're very, very feminine. I'm quite feminine because I talk very openly about my emotions and I'm not very aggressive and things like that. We all have a combination of that within us. Yeah, 100%. So maybe I don't think there's any way of thinking that a gay or lesbian couple can't bring up a child just as a man and woman will, because it's actually about filling in the dynamic and filling in the principles of those two things, rather than just, do you have a penis? Do you know what I mean?
But controlling people are very common. I think it's probably the biggest issue, I would say, in relationships.
Yeah.
One partner that's controlling.
Okay.
But does control come from insecurity, do you think? Would that person be so controlling over the other if they weren't worried they were going to be left? And that can be linking back to when you're a child and your mother didn't see you enough, or your father didn't see you enough, and you didn't feel like you had that care. Maybe then when you eventually do get a girlfriend or boyfriend, you cling on to them because you don't want to lose that affection again.
Yeah, I think so.
It's all along those lines. I mean, there's so many theories, but I think all the theories kind of just link into one another, and they're all right in some degree.
Yeah. Multiple factors that kind of intertwine together to explain things.
But it's interesting, like, with a successful partnership, one has to be dominant and one... What's the opposite of dominant?
Submissive.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. Well, it's hard. I mean, put two very headstrong, dominant people together. It's going to be difficult. I'm not saying it can't work out, but what I think that cliche claim that opposites attract is kind of true to some degree. We want people who complement our needs. That was the main phrase that we looked at in relationships in psychology. You want someone to complement your needs. You want someone to kind of fulfill the things that you can't fulfill. Calm you down if you're an energetic person, or get you going if you're someone who likes to be quite insular. Those kind of things. But also, you do want someone who's similar to you. You don't want complete chalk and cheese.
Doesn't Peterson say that the female shouldn't be dominant?
I don't think so. I think what he means is, if he has said that, I don't know if he said that, but the feminine side of things is more submissive, but the masculine side of things is more dominant. But that doesn't mean a girl can't be dominant. But that is a masculine characteristic. But that's not a bad thing.
And that, you know.
Yeah.
Philip, you're a bit older than me. How important is it to keep your immaturity on to your adult years? Like, Joel, you had a quote that was that you told me that was something along the lines of success is expressing that child when you're an adult. Do you know what I mean?
I think it was something like, what makes you a weirdo as a child is what makes your life successful when you're older.
Yeah.
And you try and like hide away from what makes you different when you're a kid because you want to fit in, but then when you're older you don't want to fit in because
Do you think it's important to be immature? Because when we go through the school system, we're taught to get more and more mature.
I think there's a difference between being mature and being like constrained.
Because one characteristic of children is they're impulsive, but then that can be quite good.
It can be, yeah. It depends. I can describe myself as rather impulsive. I get an idea and I just do it.
Yeah.
And for the most part, that serves me quite well. I experience things that otherwise I wouldn't have experienced. But again, life is usually about balance, a balancing game. So I think, it depends on definitions. What do you mean by maturity and immaturity? I would think that keeping certain things that brought up that childhood like joy that you had are important to keep. So things like your ability to laugh, your ability to be silly, your ability to just start singing songs or say random things that are nonsensical. That's quite important. But because you are advanced or you've lived a certain amount of years on this earth, you learn to control that. You learn to, I can't walk around in my workplace and just start singing, jazz, bebop jazz out of nowhere because I like it. I know and understand that I'm within the work environment and I'm supposed to do my job and focus. But does that mean as soon as I leave the office, I have to be like that? No, I just start reeling off a whole bunch of stuff that, bring that, childlike joy. I watch anime, for example, to, keep in touch with that child within me. And I think it's quite important to not let that go, because that's also part of the enjoyment of life, You can't just be all mature all the time and all responsible all the time, although some people are, and that's how they find joy. But, for the most part, it's a nice balance to have, to keep your childlike traits and abilities, because that allows you to enjoy life more.
I think part of becoming a whole human is integrating your childish side and integrating your adult side. There's times for each of them, and the extremes are not good. You find someone, there's the classic stereotype of a teacher who can never relax or have any fun. No one wants to be that guy, but also no one wants to be the guy who's 45 in his boxers in his mum's basement with a dummy in his mouth.
There you go.
And they're the two extremes that you don't want. So you need to integrate both of them. You need to kind of make the whole out of everything,
Yeah.
With all these criminals that you looked at, is there a correlation or trend of why they are where they are?
Yes, there seems to be certain factors that matter more than others. When you are in the criminal justice system, whenever you have to risk assess a person, you get to know them. You know, you ask questions about their lives. You ask questions about how they grew up, what's their philosophy on life, like how do they view their relationship with the partner, how do they interact with the world, you know, are they bored? You know, we ask questions like, you know, do you get bored? Because that's a factor within, you know, that's become a risk factor for them to committing offenses and things like that. So the tendency is usually linked with, for example, absentee fathers, like we were talking about, biological factors, the way that their brains are sort of wired, but we don't kind of do scientific studies and like find out stuff like that. But
you'll find that people are more likely to be kind of deviant in their behaviour, have less developed prefrontal cortex, things like that, and like high levels of dopamine in certain areas of the brain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some people tend to have, whenever I'm working with people, they tend to have like learning, you know, difficulties or things, or even mental health, which is a big factor.
Because they want to take it out on other things.
Potentially, yeah.
Also call for help.
Yeah, also call for help. So when you look into risk assess people and kind of find out about who they are, there are certain factors that really kind of, tell you that that's led them to their sort of criminal behavior, addictions, alcohol, mental health, and things.
My answer to my own question is, what about like bullies? Like, if you're bullied, does that then make you want to take it out on other people?
Yeah.
Because some people know, but I feel like that often happens.
Yes, it can happen for sure. It's totally natural for us to take things out on other people because we've experienced them. In fact, that tends to be linked with certain criminal behavior. So if we have experienced, you know, abuse, unfortunately, it tends to lead to the fact that we can abuse others because we have been abused ourselves. And there seems to be quite a strong correlation between those factors. So bullying is probably the same.
What's like the scariest and craziest criminals you've seen?
Oh, don't think I can discuss that.
You don't have to name them.
Yeah, no, I definitely won't name them. But the craziest ones, yeah, probably like, you know, violent sex offenders and things.
Is there something like a horrible look they have about them? And
If you pass them on the street, would you know, or do they like normal? They just like act like normal people, look like normal people.
Again, the legality side of what I'm allowed to express and not to express is a bit obscure.
But let's say, right, you've got an image in your mind of one of these people you've met. Okay, if you didn't know who they were and you passed them on the street, would you know there was something fishy, or would they fit in like everybody else?
To be honest with you, I think most people would probably say no.
So they just fit in like everybody else.
Yeah, let's just say I've obtained this information from books I've read, and yes, for the most part, people look normal. People talk and speak just like you and me, and if you are not involved in the criminal justice system, you wouldn't know a single thing.
So that means these people are among us.
They are. I mean, really,
yeah.
Clinically, 1% of people are psychopaths. So that means in your year at school, you'd have had at least one psychopath.
How do you know if you're a psychopath?
It's to do with like how you handle emotions, your level of empathy, things like that.
Why do serial killers always take out on the dog? Like in horror movies, they always kill the dog. Why? Why does it start with an animal?
I don't know about the accuracy of those movies.
You got married very recently.
Yes.
And my thoughts on marriage, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
But I have worries that I'm going to get bored of the person. So one, how do you know she was the right one?
Yeah.
And two, you know, if you're married for 50 years, you've already spoke about everything. You only speak about stuff that changes. And that's like the weather and stuff. And then, no, because old people, they have nothing to talk about. Look, they don't. I'll get, you know.
Yeah.
And old people don't like other old people. They're boring.
Right.
So yeah.
What's your first question?
How do you know she was the one?
I knew she was the one because of the way that her traits, how she acted, how she spoke, a combination of the things that I admire. So that comes out of knowing what I know is good for me as a person and is attractive to me. So I think the better you know yourself, the better you can recognize the traits in another person and where you believe it's important. So because of my past and how I've lived life and what I regard as important, I saw those qualities within her and I explored them. So I talked to her, I met up with her. And when I saw those things, which was very, very early on, I knew that she was the person I wanted to get to know more. But I gotta say, I think from the first 2 meetings, I knew instantly that I was gonna marry her. So, yeah.
2 meetings?
Yeah, yeah. And that's, a weird concept, but I think...
How many years ago did you meet her?
I met her last year.
Wow, that's quick, man.
Yeah, it is. It is quick.
Did you propose?
I proposed, yes.
Right.
Yes, I did. But it's again, I've been single all of my life. So that also,
Until her?
Until her, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing,
for most
man.
of my life. I have had another serious sort of relationship. So outside of that, yeah, it's been her. So I because I've thought about this for years.
Yeah.
I've lived life and I've sort of come to, make my own conclusions as to what is important.
Yeah.
And when I see that, when I saw that, I recognized it.
Could you give me one or two of those traits that she had and you were like, damn, this is it?
Yeah. She is very, very considerate, right? Very, very caring. She's got this caring nature about her. That it's up to a point where I'm like, how are you still asking the same question? Like, how are you thinking about me when I'm just so full within myself? Like, I think about myself all the time. So little things, it's the little things. Like, would you like this drink? You take it instead of me. Would you like to go here instead of where I want to go to? So she put me first, whereas it's quite natural to put yourself first. So it's this almost sacrificial sort of quality about her that drew me to her. So because I know that no matter what I do, she's always going to be looking out for my best interest. And that inspires me to look out for her.
But in terms of the traits, like, that's why they say you got to love yourself before you can love other people, because you know what you wanted, and you did that through loving yourself, right?
I gotta say, yeah. Knowing myself, and can't really say I loved myself, but I certainly knew who I was and who I am as a person and what I need, and I've made the mistake of believing certain people are good for me when they're not, and just learned from my lesson.
And the second one was how will you know in 30 years you won't get bored of her?
As you grow older, you will, I believe, because I'm discovering this, the simple things in life become the joys.
But I don't like simple stuff.
I know you don't, but I think as you grow older, you will find that things you never, were simple. Because when we're kids, for example, right, we find joy in absolutely everything. We can have a tiny little bowl or whatever it is, and we're going to have fun with that bowl for weeks, and it's just like one tiny little object. You don't even have to give a child anything like specific or something elaborate. They will have fun, they will dream, they will imagine, they will sit on the couch and be laughing about how squidgy it is, you know what I mean? So I think we sort of revert as we grow older, so that's why maybe to you old people don't talk about anything interesting besides the weather or whatever, because I think we somehow find then the joys in the simple things. And I think when you do find the right person for you, as you grow older together, you will find joys in simple things, and you will never get bored of her, because you will have a person who deeply and intimately knows you, and you will know her deeply and intimately as well. And that is a connection that I think you will cherish and you will not be able to let go of.
That's inspiring, man. That's inspiring.
That's such a great way to end.
Yeah. Right, AI news time.
AI news. News.
So basically, this is a segment where Jacob finds some information from an what's the word?
Unknown source.
An unknown source, right?
All right.
About artificial intelligence.
Oh, okay.
And he tells us about this information that he's found.
All right, right.
And we interpret, number one, what we think of it, and number two, whether it's real or fake.
Ah, okay.
Interesting. I mean, Jacob claims that they're all real, so...
Right.
Let's go.
Philip, have you ever been to Glastonbury?
No.
Okay, so this one happened at this Glastonbury a couple of weeks
recently.
ago. So, on one of the small stages, they got a DJ playing, right? Crowd are loving it. He finishes his set, he starts to pack up, but the crowd are like, no, come on, one more, we want one more. You know, as you do. Music's still playing through the speakers, and so he plays along with it.
And he's a robot.
But eventually, the next artist is ready to come on, and the DJ's still playing. So the staff are like, come on, it's this guy's turn, got to come off. And he's like, no, still got to go, still locked in the headphones. And eventually they sort of drag him out, and the music's still playing through the speakers.
Right.
But eventually they pull the plug.
Yeah.
And turns out all the music was generated by AI, and he was just playing along, faking it.
Ah.
He was never touching. So he was pretending
Sure.
to be the DJ.
Sure.
But all the music was generated by AI.
Okay.
And and then he got the timings a little bit wrong because he thought his set was going to go on for a bit longer.
Yeah.
So the music was still set to do more and more songs.
Yeah.
But his set finished, that's why it's still playing.
Okay.
So so this week's AI news.
Right, I mean... I can actually see that one being real, you know. I thought you were going to say that the DJ was a robot, and then that's absolutely
That's
bollocks.
where I thought you were going.
How do you make music with AI? It just like puts the notes together and...
I no, honestly, anyone can do it. They've done like hour-long podcasts AI generated.
Seriously?
Yeah, I've seen the Joe Rogan AI experience where they've just like generated everything from all of the thousands of hours of what he's said to create a voice and what he might say, and they've also had other people on it. I think they did like a Tate that they'd made out of AI of all Tate's interviews and stuff, and they basically put people that everyone would wish had been on Rogan onto this like fake Rogan that's all made with AI. It's scary.
And as for music, I guess it's just an algorithm that generates certain parts of stuff and puts into a song. There was a Drake song that released that was an AI song, and he posted it and stuff, yeah.
So were Glastonbury not livid when they found out the bloke had just like put some numbers into an algorithm and made his music?
Well, the thing is, it looked bad for them because they didn't really want people to know, so they sort of swept it under.
Oh, of course.
Ooh.
Jeez.
Corruption, mate, corruption. Yeah, I think it will get to a point where all of our entertainment will just be like you'll have human entertainment and you have AI entertainment. So like there'll still be humans making music and that, but it'll be like it's in its own league.
Well, I'm not massively aware of this, but my mum told me that all the Hollywood actors, a lot of them, are on strike because they're now generating the scripts and the screenplays and stuff by AI, and they don't want that. They want, because all the writers, and you know, they're not gonna have jobs and stuff. So.
Wow. Is that why movies are so terrible these days? Because honestly, it's just movies and music. Sometimes I'm kind of like, why?
There's just loads of robots sat in a room just looking at each other, being like, "Yes, let's do."
Honestly, there's got to be stuff we don't know about that's been hidden, that's generated by AI.
I do think music today is awful.
Yeah, I agree.
I listen to very little of like. I don't think I listen to any song in the charts really nowadays.
I'm hopeful, and I look around, and I, just like see what's top on Spotify or whatever it is, and I just give up after a few minutes.
I think the problem is with music is that people get there's a difference between something that's catchy and something that's good. What makes a song do extremely well is if it's good and catchy. But most people now just go for catchy.
Yeah, there's no real depth.
Exactly. So a lot of the good stuff you don't actually see because it doesn't get it doesn't do well on the charts. A lot of the catchy stuff, like, you know, Gucci Gang is an absolutely terrible song, has no meaning whatsoever, yet it has billions of YouTube views, and so
it's just a meme at the end of the day, isn't it? Really.
And obviously TikTok did not help with that at all, because all the TikTok people just want catchy songs.
And then you've got all the people kind of like pouring their heart out into like meaningful songs that aren't that catchy, but they're like campfire tunes where they've like put all the pain that they've had in recent times into a song, and no one cares because you can't like snippet that into a soundbite to make a TikTok out of it.
Yeah,
it is a shame. I mean, like the good, you know, I think that there's a loss of appreciation with music. The good songs do not get appreciated.
Well, there we go.
So, Philip,
thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Oh, pleasure.
I think we need to get you on again because I feel like we just scratched the surface there.
Yeah.
I have much more to discuss on various of those topics. Jacob, do you want to tell the people an email that they can use to send us some questions for future episodes?
Yeah, so you can either message us on or comment on us, but if you don't want to and you want to be old-fashioned, email questions at openmindedpodcast.co.uk.
Thank you very much, everyone. Cheers, Philip. It's been great, man.
Thank you for having me.